Hello everyone! So now we are going to learn on how to add vectors using the component method. But before we go to our calculations, let us have here a review on what we have discussed in our previous sessions. So what I have here are the following equations we ginamit last time. So we have here the Pythagorean Theorem, and we have C is equal to square root of A squared plus B squared. So, amo na siya ginagamit ang equations ang ligad. We use Pythagorean Theorem in order for us to get the resultant vector of our components or our given vectors. There. So, also, we use the SOHCAHTOA. But then, ang mas ginagamit na si tangent function kay SOHCAHTOA. So, ginagamit na si tangent function in order for us to get the angle of our vector. Yan. But then, if you know how to use the sine and cosine functions, there's no problem. You are free to use those functions as long as you can come up with the correct answer, man. So, there. And, last time we were also able to learn on how to get the x and y component of a particular vector. So, we have here the equations. For the x component, we're going to use d cosine theta. And for the y component, we're going to use the d sine theta. So, kung nadumduman nyo, or if you can still remember, di ba, may pa drama-drama to si Miss sa inyong relationship in order for us to remember our equations. Ayan. So, let us go first then kay theta or for the angle. So, take note if we're going to look for the angle, you just paminsaron ng nga si theta ang ginapangita mo. Take note that the angle is represented by a variable nga theta. Si theta, theta, theta. So, mo na siyang tandaan. Okay, so there. Now, kung nalipat ka sa imo nga formula in solving for the theta, paminsaron mo, si theta nagpatan. Again, si theta nagpatan. So, kung madumduman mo gani nga si theta nagpatan, meaning, if I'm going to look for the value of my theta, meaning, I'm going to use the tangent function. Ayan. So, na siya ang imo lang tandaan. Now, in looking for the y component and for the x component, paano ta naman tandaan? Let us have here our x component. So, take note, imagine na bala, pinapangita mo ang imo x sa vector. Okay? Pinapangita mo ang x mo sa vector component. Okay, so paano ko na siya ma-solve or makita ang iyang value? Okay, so paminsaron mo, ano ayhan ang mga causes? Anong mga causes nga aging bayaan ko sang x ko? Ano ang mga causes nga nag-break kami sang x ko? So, meaning, kung pangitaon mo gali si x, pangitaon mo ang cos or may use ka sang cos. Cos for cosine. Ayan. Basta x ang ginapangita mo, mangita ka sang cos. Or the cosine function. Hindi mo nga gamitan. So, there. Also, for the y component naman. Finish man. For the y component naman, paano ta naman isolve si y component? Paminsara naman, why? What are the signs? What are the signs nga nag-break kita nga duwa? Amo na siyang paminsaron. So, meaning, if pangitaan mo si y component, you're going to use the sine or the cosine function. Again, for the x component, pangita ang causes. Or, kung madumduman mo ng causes, gano'n magpangita sa x. Meaning, cosine function gamitan mo. Kung y naman, what are the signs? Why, what are the signs? So, it means that may use ka sa sine function. So, I hope nga madumduman lang, ma-refresh lang tanan sa imo nga mind ang equation nga gamiton. Okay, there. So, that's for our equations. Now, let us have here our Cartesian plane. So, I know most of you are very familiar with what is a Cartesian plane is. So, in the Cartesian plane, we have the x and the y component. And also, we have the 4 quadrants. So, what are these 4 quadrants? So, what is in these 4 quadrants? Now, if you can see here, in the first quadrant, may ara ka na diri, positive na x and y. For the second quadrant, negative ang imo x and positive imo y. For the third quadrant, we have here the x and y values are all negative. And for the fourth quadrant, we have the x which is positive and your y which is negative. So, ayun. And also, in a quadrant, dira mo man mabalaan kung pila ang angles ng imo nga vector. Now, paano mo na siya i-follow ang angle? You just follow the counterclockwise direction of the angle para ma-determine mo kung pila na siya ka-degree ang angle sa iyong mga vector. So we have here from east going to north or from positive x going to positive y, we have here 90 degrees. Okay, so going naman kay west or kay negative x, we have here another 90. So 90 plus 90, we have 180 degrees. Now going south, we have 270. And as you complete the whole circle, you will have 360 degrees. Ayan. So that are the angles in our Cartesian plane. And I have here the following directions for the angles nga makita ta sa Cartesian plane. So if the direction of the angle is following the counterclockwise, again, the counterclockwise direction, meaning ang iyan ng angle will be positive. Okay? Now, what if it is following the clockwise direction? Basta clockwise direction naman gani, ang iyang angles are negative. Now, what is the purpose of having a positive and a negative angle? So, these positive and negative angles will indicate the direction of your angle. Okay? Mabalaan mo na siya nga counterclockwise ang direction sa imong angle if positive ang iyang angle. Ayan. Next, mabalaan mo na siya nga negative ang imong nga angle kay naga clockwise direction ng iyang nga arrow. So, amo na siya permi ang imo lang tawon. Okay, there. So, later on, we're going to use that positive and negative angles para ma-intindihan niyo pag-get. Okay, so there. Let's move on. Now, if you can see here, we have the north of east, east of north, ng mga naming of directions. Okay, so paano ta na sila gamiton? So, let us have here. Okay, oh, there it is. Naglago ang slides limits. What happened, man? Okay, so there. Okay, so we have here the naming of our reference angle. So we have north of east, east of north. I know nabatian niya na siya. And I know familiar na kamusin na. Yan. Okay. Now, how can I determine na north of east na siya ang direction of a particular angle? For example, mabutang kita di kay theta. Let's say si theta is equivalent to 50 degrees. Ayan, 50 degrees. Okay, there it is. Okay, so how can I determine that the angle is in north of east nga direction? So this is for the north, this is for the south, this is for the west, and this is for the east. Oh my gosh, wala ba ang kurit sa east? Okay, so there. Okay, so paano ko na siya mabalaan? So this is our Cartesian plane. Take note nga si north kag east is on the first quadrant. Okay? So butang kita diri 50 degrees. But the question is, diin na ang directions ng 50 degrees ko. Is it clockwise or counterclockwise? Okay. If you have there north of east, tandaan mo lang, if you can see here, may name na di ka last name si Miss. Ang north, siya na ang imo pangalan. Ang east, amo ng apelyido mo. Now, if you're going to write the angle on your Cartesian plane, you're going to write the last name before the first name. Again, you're going to write the last name before the first name. So, meaning, unahon ta ang apelyido ta. So, let's say, ang akong apelyido is Monotilia. Mabutang ko sa akon nga Cartesian plane. Monotilia Karina. So, paano ko na siya i-connect sa akon angles? There. Akon nga last name is on the east. So, meaning, unahan ko disulat si east. ang akong nga first name is north, going north. So, kinahanglan ng akong nga angle is going man north. So, here, last name, first name. So, kung sino di sa ulihi, siya na ang imong halinan. Kung sino sa una nga ngalan, siya na ang imong kadtuan. So, we have here east going to north. Ayan. That is east going to north. Okay, this is it. And this is north of east. Ayan. So, there you have it. Okay. Now, that's for the north of east. What if we have here south of west? What if we're going to use south of west? Paano naman na siya ibutang sa atong Cartesian plane? So, we have here the west and this is the south. So, this is located on the third quadrant. Oh, let us have it here. So, we have the last name and the first name. So, we have here the angle which is south of west. Meaning, halin siya sa west, manaog siya sa south. So, we have here south of west. Ayan. South of west. Last name going to first name. And there it is. That's for the south of west. Now, last one. We have here west of north. West of north. It means that ang angle ta is from the west. Oh, sorry. Ang angle ta is from the north going to the west. North papuntang west. Ayan. It's north papuntang west. Okay, there it is. Now, let us have it here, our angle. North papuntang west. Okay, there. Our last name papuntang first name. So, yan. Amo na siya magbutang sang angles and our Cartesian plane. So, usually, this naming of angles are on the reference angle ni sila, kalabanan. So, yan. So, there it is for our naming of angles. So, I hope that you just understand how do we identify kung diin na siya halin ng angle kag diin na siya pakadto. So, ayan. Okay, so moving on, we have here the vectors creating right angles. So, amo to siya last time. Naggamit kita Pythagorean Theorem in order for us to get the resultant vector. Okay? So, hindi kita ka-use Pythagorean Theorem in looking for the resultant vector natin if wala pa nag-right triangle ang aton nga mga vectors. Wala pa sila nag-form right triangle. So, we need to make sure nga naka-right triangle sila. Now, if in the problem, automatic na sila nga naghimo right triangle, then directly use the Pythagorean Theorem in looking for the resultant vector. So, there, amo na siyang himuon. Okay, so that's it. Now, moving on. Here we have solving for the x and y component. Okay, so paano ta gani gin-use si x or gin-solve si x and y component? Amo to siya si x mo kag si y mo. Nangita kita sang causes, nangita mo kita sang sines. Or nag-use kita cosine and sine functions. So, amo to siya last time ang aton nga gin-tunan. Okay, so that's it. Okay, so let us move on naman sa aton nga adding of vectors wherein we're going to solve x and y component of more than 2 vectors. So, amo naman siya ang i-learn ta. Okay. So, last time, nagamit kita Pythagorean Theorem. Also, nagamit kita sang sine and cosine functions in looking for the x and y component. And, sang gin-solve ta to, 2 vectors pa lang to ang ginagamit or 2 given ng mga vectors. Okay? Now, what if in the problem you have more than 2 vectors to add? So, what are we going to do? Okay? Now, if you have more than 2 vectors to add, then that's the time na si Pythagorean Theorem kag si sine and cosine functions na to, i-combine ta to sila tanan para makita ta aton nga resultant vector. Okay? So, for us to further understand on how to use our equations, let us have here our first example. Okay, there. So, I have here a piece of paper. And dili tanan ni Miss i-show ang atong calculation because medyo laba siya. But don't worry, hapus lang ni siya. Hapus lang din ni siya. Okay, so here we have our first set of given. So let us write our given here on our paper. We have there d sub 1, which is equal to 15 meters, 34 degrees north of east. Ayan. Okay, d sub 2. Listada lang ang ato na given. So this is 17 meters directed north. And d sub 3, this is 16 meters directed west. So we are going to look for the value of our resultant vector. Pila ang iya nga resultant displacement. Ayan. Also, since we're talking about vectors here, we need to know the angle or the direction of our vector. So, ayon. So, to solve for our d sub r or our theta and our theta, ayan, so we're going first to plot the vectors in our Cartesian plane. So, kinahanglan kabalugid kita mag-plot vectors in the Cartesian plane because this is a very big help for us to easily determine diin ang locations ng vector ta, diin ang iyang diin siya nga quadrant na bilong, ano ang iyang x and y na values. So that's it. So we have here our Cartesian plane. Ayan. So in a Cartesian plane, as you draw your Cartesian plane, just indicate lang gid the directions kung diin si north, diin si south, diin si west, and si east para hindi ka mo magtalang. Ayan. So let us plot our d sub 1. So let's say this is for the d sub 1. Take note, by the way, nga si d sub 1 ta is 34 degrees north of east. So diin siya si northeast, diin siya si east. Well, anyway, so we have here the north and east. Okay, this is for the north and east. So we have there 34 degrees. So meaning from east, makikita kita 34 degrees going to the north. Amo na siya dapat. So here we have our 15 degrees. 34 degrees. So this is d sub 1, 15 meters. And this is for our the angle. Ayan. This is 34 degrees. Okay. Now let us have our head to tail method. So i-connect natin d sub 2 or d second vector kay first vector. If you've watched Centipede, do paminsara lang diba ang buli isang isa ka person, gin-connect siya sa mouth ng isa ka person, diba? Muna siya sa Centipede na movie. So, muna siya sa head to tail. Ang arrowhead or ang head ng isa ka vector, i-connect mo na siya sa tails ng isa ka vector man. Connect lang siya. Connect lang. Ayan. So I have here a small Cartesian plane. So ginbutanin ni si small Cartesian plane para guide mo na siya mag-determine sa imo nga second vector kung diin siya nabilong. So for our second vector, it is directed to north. So may ari di ato north, south, west, and east. So meaning diri si north, diri man ta mabutang sang 17 meters ta. Okay, there. This is for the 17 meters. Okay, label lang. D sub 2, we have 17 meters. Next, let us have here our third vector. See, third vector, this is quite longer than our first vector, because this is 16 meters. But then, iyang direction is directed west. Okay, so ayun. Oh, this is for our D sub 3. This is 16 meters. Ayan, so there we have our three vectors. Now, diin ta makita ang aton nga resultant. In looking for the resultant, you have to connect it from the tail of the first vector up to the head of the last vector. So, amo na ni siyang aton nga resultant. Okay, so here it is. And this is for the D sub R. Okay. Now, anong pangitaon ta? We cannot directly determine the value of our D sub R. Why? Because we don't have here the right triangle. So, it is very important sa aton nga kinahanglan kabalo kita look for the X and Y component. Ha? Okay, so, mahimo kita right triangle. Dapat butangan to di siya sa sang Y component and sang X component. So, amo na di siya ang pangitaon ta. Let me write it here. So, amo ni siya ang pangitaon ta. Ayan. So, amo ni siya ang Y component ang pangitaon ta. And amo ni siya nga X component dili sa dalom ang pangitaon ta man. Okay. So, this is for our summation of D sub Y and summation of D sub X. So, amo na siya ang pangsumahon ta later on. So, in order for us to get the value of these two, we need to look for the X and Y component of each vector that we have in the given. So, let me write here a small table lang to show. This is to show the values later on para mas organize maglantos ang values later on for our X and Y component. So, we have here, yan, na-table lang si Miss para organize. Ito ka-organize lang siya, tulupon. Oh my gosh, natamaan ko siya kagamay ang isa. So, let me have here it is. Okay, so ayan, we have here the X and Y nga column. That's for our X and Y values later on. Doon na medyo dakuan din ni sa variable. So, this for the variable, we have D sub 1, D sub 2, D sub 3, and our summation. Summation of D sub X and summation of D sub Y. Okay, now let us solve for our X and Y component. So, let us have here D sub 1 first. For the D sub 1, we have 15 meters for its magnitude. And pila ang iya nga angle. So, in having the angle, in solving for the X and Y component, you must use the final angle of the vector. Now, since our vector here is located on the first quadrant, let me write here, this is located on the first quadrant, and this is already following the counterclockwise direction ng aton angle. So, kung pila ang imong reference angle, equal na siya sa final angle nga gamiton mo. So, if your reference angle is equal to 34 degrees, your final angle there would be 34 degrees as well. So, butalan di siya si 34 degrees, and after that, solve for your X and Y component. So, in solving for the X and Y, let us have your D1X is equal to D cosine theta, and D1Y, we have D sine theta. Now that you have here the values, all you need to do is to simply substitute it on the equation. So, amo na siya. So, we have 15 cosine 34. So, 15 cosine 34, let us use here our calculator. So, here it is. Okay, ayan. So, 15 cosine 34. 34. Okay, and that's equal to 12.44. So, just write your value here, D1X. This is 12.44 meters. And there it is. Ayan. Okay, now let us solve for our D1Y. In solving for the D1Y, same lang na siya kay D1X. The difference is, instead of using the cosine function, you're going to use the sine function na. So we have here, change mo lang, 15 cosine, instead of cosine, change it to sine. And there you have 8.39 meters. So D1Y mo is 8.39 meters. Okay. So after that, butang lang ang value inside the table. So 12.44 meters. And then you have 8.39 meters. Okay, so that's it. I hope that it's just clear there on your part. Yes, I hope so. This is 39. Ayan. That's 39, huh? Yeah, I hope that's kind of clear. Okay. Now let us solve for our d sub 2. D sub 2 naman. For our magnitude here, it's 17 meters. Now, take note nga si d sub 2 is located on the north direction or the positive y-axis. Here it is. Now, as we all know, from east going to north, we have 90 degrees. So, since ang aton nga d sub 2 is on the north nga direction, nagakadto, so meaning our angle there would be 90 degrees. So, all we need to do is substitute. So, d2x is equal to d cosine theta. d2y is equal to d sine theta. Substitute lang. Sub. 17 cosine 90. So, pila na siya si 17 cosine 90? Let us have here in our calculator, 17 cosine 90. Yes, there we have 0. d2x yan. And how about your d2y? It's 17. It should be 17. Substitute na. 17 sine 90. So we have here, this is for the d2y. Substitute lang. Okay, just change on your calculator si cosine ng sine. Ayan. And there you have it. You have 17 meters. Okay, underline lang ni Miss. And then, write the values on the table. So, we have 0 here, and we have 17 meters for the y. Now, let us solve for our d sub 3. In solving for the d sub 3, same thing man gyapon, same equation to use. We have your d sub 3 is equal to, how much is the magnitude? Okay, this is 16 meters. 16 meters, and this is directed to west. Now, if the vector is directed to west, we have here east to north, we have 90, right? From north to west, we have here another 90. So therefore, from east going to west, we have here 180 degrees. Now, since going to west ang direction sa aton nga third vector, we have here 180 degree nga angle. Okay, so there. And then, solve na for the x and y. So, d3x is equal to d cosine theta, and d3y is equal to d sine theta. Substitute. We have here 16 cosine 180. So, pila na siya si 16 cosine 180? 16 cosine 180. Okay, that's negative 16 meters, and that's for your d3x. So, for the d3y, 16 sine 180. So, we have here, just change cosine to sine. Let us have, oh yan, that's 0. d3y mo is 0. Now, we have here the x and y component of the three vectors. Okay. So, butang lang ni Miss, this is 16 meters, and then this is 0. Now, since we already have here the values of the x and y components, let us just simply add the following values. So, i-add ta na yung aton nga x component. So, we have here 12.44. Never mind na lang si 0. So there plus, kita lang gid ni Miss ha, 16. 16, negative 16 meters. Oh, yan. We have negative 3.56. So let me just write here the value. So this is negative 3.56 meters. Ayan. Now let us solve for the d sub y naman. So for the d sub y, we have 8.39 plus 17. Okay, ayan. We have 25.39. So 25.39 meters. Now that we have our summation of d sub x and d sub y, let us write here our values na lang. Okay. So for our summation of d sub y, we have 25.39 meters. So amo na siyang ato niya y. Nakita mo ng y. Okay, now how about the x? Let us write here our x value. So we have 3.56 meters. So ayan, 3.56 meters. Okay, now if you can see there, you have here the negative value in our table, but then you have here the positive value on the Cartesian plane nga nag-amo na siya. Take note nga, the negative sign in our calculation will indicate its direction. So, if negative ang x niya dire, in our table, this will tell us that this x component is lying on the negative x axis. Again, this x component is lying on the negative x axis. Or this is facing going to the west. Okay, negative yung value. This is going to the west. Ayan. Now, why is it that we have here the positive value on the Cartesian plane? The reason why nga absolute value ang gingamit ni Miss, it is because we have here already the arrow. So, this arrow now will give us or will tell us that this x component or this vector is going to the west, or it is directed west, or this is lying on the negative x-axis. Okay. So, kung wala siya gani arrow, of course, we need to indicate whether it is positive or negative. Ayan. So, I hope na gets lang siya. Okay. Now, that we have here our d sub x and d sub y already, let us solve for our d sub r. So, in solving for the d sub r, all we need to use is the Pythagorean Theorem na. Nga, kay nakahiho, nakita diri sa ato niya, right triangle. So, there. So, let us have here, d sub r is equal to the square root of, square root of summation of d sub x squared plus summation of the d sub y squared. And after that, just simply substitute the values in the equation. So, pila ang value ni d sub x mo? Let us take a look on the values here on the table na lang ha. Para dili lang tatanan malantaw, mag-solve kita. Okay, so we have here negative 3.56 meters squared plus 25.39 meters squared. Ayan. So, we have here square root of, okay, square to dani ang values. Ayan. So, we have negative 3.56 squared. And there we have, we have 12.67. Let us write here 12.67 meter squared plus, we have 25.39 squared. We have 644.65. We have 644.65 meter squared. Cancel lang si square root tsaka yung square on each units. And also, bisan gin cancel mo na si square root kag ang square sa each unit, don't forget also to square root the values. Kaya ang square root na palanda is the unit, wala pang values. O yan. So, let us solve for the values here. So, we have your square root of 12.67 oops, sorry, it's 67 plus 644.65 equals 25.64. So we have 25.64. So let me write here 25.64 meters. And this is now for our D sub R. Na-solve ta na ato nga D sub R. Okay? Butang din ni Miss. D sub R na siya natin. Okay, so let us write here our value for the D sub R. Let me have here 25.64 meters. Ayan, so we have there the value already. But we are not yet done because we still have to look for the angle or for the direction of our resultant vector. So, ayan. So, in looking for the resultant vector, let us use our tangent function. So, in using for the tangent function, let us have here tan theta is equal to y over x. Ayan. So, this is for our equation na lang nga gamiton. Okay, nga kay ang y ta is for the opposite. Here is our y and ang x ta is for the adjacent. Ayan. Okay. Next, diin ta siya makita ang aton nga angle. Kung maglantaw ta, ang aton nga angle is located here. So, in writing the reference angle or in determining the reference angle, you must take note nga naka-relative to the x-axis na siya. Naka-relative to x-axis. Maghama ka gani relative to x-axis, it means that ang imo nga angle is from the x-axis. Whether diin man na siya nga quadrant lie, kinanglan mahalin siya sa x ang imo nga angle. So, we have here our angle. Dapat halin siya sa x, amo na siya masaka. Da siya dayon. I hope nakitaon lang siya. Oh, there. So, this is it. So, amo ni siya ang aton nga pangitaon. And take note, as we use the tangent function, ang ginapangita pa lang natin is the reference angle. Okay? So, it is very important nga kabalo kita sa aton nga reference angle. So, let us have here, if this is the theta, this is your y, and this is your x. Kinanglan ng imo nga theta or imo nga reference angle is facing, naga-face na siya permi sa imo nga y. And permi niya sa tiilan ang imo nga x. Okay, ayan. So, we have here our equation. Next, let us have here our variables for the y. Of course, obviously, we have here the summation of d sub y for the y nga component, and for the x, we have summation of d sub x. And after that, just simply substitute the values in the equation. We have summation of d sub y, which is 25.39 meters. Ayan. So, and then after that, we have here let's use here. It's negative 3.56. So, muna siyang gamiton tanga values, ha? As we solve for our tangent function, let us use the values in our table. Okay, so there, cancel the units for meters. Okay, so next, what we're going to do is transpose on the other side ang imong tangent function. So, we have here tangent negative 1, or this is called as the arctangent. So, ang totoo din ang ngalan is arctangent, pero ang ginhimo ni Miss tangent negative ni 1 ni ginhimo ni Miss tangent negative 1 kay para mas tapos sa inyo matandaan nga may negative 1 na da siyang exponent. Okay, so there. Now, let us substitute the values in our parenthesis here. Enclose na lang sa parenthesis ang ating fraction. So, we have 25.39 over negative 3.56. So, there you have it. So, there we have our equation or our values now. So, all we have to do is to encode or type the values in our calculator. So, here we have shift tan. Okay, shift tan. Let us have here the fraction. We have 25.39 39 over negative 3.56. Ayan. So, kinanglan ibutang talang da siya. And of course, enclose the value in a parenthesis. Gid sila dapat nga duwa. Okay? So, we have here equals, this is negative 82.02. So, we have, let me write here, 82.02 degrees. Again, take note, this is just our reference angle. Now, how do we find our final angle? So, in looking for the final angle, take note that our resultant here is located on the second quadrant. Okay, so since this is located on the second quadrant, we have here our, from east going to west, we have 180. Again, east going to west, we have 180. But then, if you can see here, we have here our reference angle. So, samtang ang aton nga angle from here east going to west, nag-create siya 180, may nagbalik siya nga 82.02 degrees. Ari siya, amo ni siya ang nagbalik nga 82.02 degrees. So, what are we going to do? So, we just simply subtract our reference angle to 180. So, we have 180 minus 82.02 degrees. Okay. If you can see here, we have a negative value of our angle. Now, this negative value of our angle or our reference angle will just indicate its direction. If you can see, negative siya, meaning ka-clockwise siya. But if you're going to take a look on your final angle, you need to use the absolute value dapat. Okay? Again, you need to use the absolute value. So, we have here 180 minus 82 is we have there. Let us take a look. Pila na da siya. So, 180 minus 82.02. Ayan. So, this is equal to 97.98. So, let us have here. Your final angle is 97.98 degrees. Okay, so let me just box this. Okay, so there. That's for our final angle. Now, how do we write our final answer? So, magsulat sa final answer. Dili lang butang ni Miss. D sub r is we have 25.64 meters. What's the angle? This is 97.98 degrees. And there we have it. This is now for our resultant vector. Resultant vector ta na siya. So, I hope na nag-gets lang kung paano mag-solve sa resultant vector. So, there. Okay. Now, let us have our second example. On our second example, let us have this one. Okay, so we have there, D sub 1 natin is 5 meters directed east. D sub 2 natin is 12 meters, and this is 57 degrees south of west. And for the D sub 3, we have 5 meters. Again, this is directed to east. Okay, kung nantawon ta sila, amo man to pareho man to siya kagina sa aton nga ginhimo or sa aton nga given. So, ang himuon ta is kung paano ta gin-solve ang our previous example, same man ni sa gihapon. So, we are going to look for the D sub r and for the theta. Okay, now let us plot our values or our vectors in our Cartesian plane. So, we have here our Cartesian plane. This is for our x-axis. Ayan. This is for the x-axis. Now, let us have here the y-axis. The y-axis. Here it is. Okay, so there. This is for the north, south, west, and east. Okay, so ayan. Let us plot our vectors in the Cartesian plane. So let's say this is for the 5 newtons. Ito yung 5 newtons. This is directed east. Okay, let us have here D sub 1, 5. Sorry, it's 5 meters, not newtons. We're dealing here with displacement. Okay, next, let us have here a small Cartesian plane. Yan, this is for the north, south, west, and east for our small Cartesian plane. So, ang himuon tayo, plot na ang ato niya 57 degrees south of west. So, this is the west, this is the south. So, kinanglan ari di siya. And also, take note nga south of west. So, kinanglan later on, ang aton nga angle would be from west going to south. So, let us have here our second vector. So, here it is. Ayan. So, there, for our D sub 2, this is 12 meters. And the intabutang si 57 degrees. So, 57 degrees south of west is here. From west, this is going south. This is 57 degrees. And next, let us have here our 5 meters. Mabutang naman kita 5 meters directed east man siya gyapon. So, ma-plot kita diri. So, here it is. Oops. See, let's see. It's here. Ayan. Let us have here 5 meters. Okay. So, this is for the 5 meters directed east. Okay. So, label lang siya ni Miss. We have here D sub 3. This is 5 meters. Now, diin ta makita ang aton nga resultant. So, si resultant ta is here. Ayan, this is for our resultant. Okay, so there we have for our resultant. So, as we solve for our resultant, we need to look for the x and y component of our vectors. Okay. So let us have here a small table for our values. Okay, so this is for the x and for the y component, and this for the variables. So we have d sub 1, d sub 2, and d sub 3, and for our summation. Now let us solve for our d sub 1. For our d sub 1, we have there, okay, d sub 1, ang magnitude natin is 5 meters. Now, this is going to east. So, kay tungod going siya kay east, ang iyang direction is 0. So, there. Okay. Next, let us have here our x and y component. So, d1x is equal to d cosine theta. d1y is equal to d sine theta. Substitute lang ang aton nga value. So, we have here 5 cosine 0. So, pila na siya si 5 cosine 0. Let us use our calculator. 5 cosine 0. 5 cosine, there we have. That's 5. So, we have 5 meters for the d1x. Now, for the d1y, we have 5 sine 0. So, pila na siya si 5 sine 0. Just change cosine to sine. And there we have 0 for the d1y. So, underline Miss. And then, I'm going to write the value on our table. So, 5 meters and 0. Okay. Next, let us solve for our d sub 2. d sub 2 natin is 12 meters. Take note, this is 57 degrees south of west. Diin si south of west. This is the south, this is the west. Take note, basta gani, south of west, that is located on the third quadrant. So let us have here Q3. This is for the third quadrant. Now, if sa third quadrant ang imo nga angle, let's say we have here the angle from east going to west, we have 180. Now, if you can see here, ang iya nga angle is in counterclockwise direction man. Pariyo sa direction sa aton nga angle diri. So, what we're going to do is, we just simply add this 57 to 180. So, amo ni siya ang ginalanta ta diri nga angle. This is the small Cartesian plane. Diri ta malanta sa gamay nga angle. Let me use this one. Here it is. Ayan. So, this is 180. Okay, may small kita diri nga Cartesian. This is 180. And then, may nasugpon nga 57 degrees. So, himuon ta, let us have here. Let us add our reference angle 280. So, 180 plus 57 degrees. So, we have, let us look here on our calculator, 180 plus 57. Plus 57, we have 237. 237 degrees for our theta. So, this is now our final angle nga is substitute in our equation. So, we have here 237 degrees. Na yan. So, let us solve here our d1x and d1y. d2x gali, sorry. d2x, d cosine theta, and d2y. Ayan, d2y, we have d sine theta. Substitute lang the values. You have 12 meters cosine. Pilang imo nga angle? This 237. Okay, so you have 12 cosine 237. Pila na siya ayhan? Okay, so we have negative 6.54 meters. So, negative 6.54 meters. Ayan, that's for our D2X. So, underline lang ni Miss para makita nyo. Okay, next. We have here 12 sine 237 or 237 for the angle. Ayan, so we have here, pila na siya. So, we have 12 sine 237. Okay, that's negative 10.06. We have negative 10.06 meters. So, that's for the D2Y. Okay. So, there you have it. Now, take note nga, ang imong second vector rather, imong second vector is on the third quadrant. Okay? Since ara siya sa third quadrant, kinanglan iya x and y here nga value are both negative. So, amo na siyang himuan ta. Amo na siya dapat ang imo nga tandaan. So, we have here negative 6.54 meters kag negative 10.06 meters. Ayan. Next, let us have here the D sub 3. So, si D sub 3 mo, same lang siya kay D sub 1 mo. 5 meters and also the angle is equal to 0. So, sundon ta lang ni siya. So, we have the D3x is equal to D cosine theta and D3y we have D sine theta. So, we have there 5 cosine 0. So, same lang sila, 5 meters man na siya, D3x mo. O, same man ni siya sa babaw, kay same lang ilang given, o. Pariyo sila. So, butang ta lang 5 sine 0. So, this is equal to 0 man si D3y. Okay, so there, underline lang ni Miss. And then, let us have here our values on the table. So, 5 meters na siya, and then 0 na siya. Okay, now it's time for us to add our values. So, but solve ta una si d sub x naton. So, we have there 5 meters plus negative 6.54 plus 5. Okay, so there we have 3.46. We have positive 3.46. So we have d sub x natin is 3.46 meters. Now, how about your d sub y? If you can see, siya lang isa ang value. So for d sub y, this is equivalent to negative 10.06 meters. So ayan. This is now the value for our d sub x and d sub y. Okay, so there. So how are we going to solve for our vectors? So ayan, this is for our, so I hope lang later on yung mag-gets mo ha. Ayan, ayan, ayan. So, ito na yung aton nga summation of d sub y. Summation of d sub y. So, this is negative 10.06. But let me write here 10.06. Okay, so there. So again, ginbutang ni Miss ang absolute value because we already have here the arrow which will indicate that this is directed south or this is lying on the negative y-axis. And this is for our d sub y. Ari ding aton nga d sub y. So ang d sub y naton there, do medyo hindi siya kitaon because we have here the vector. So, here it is. So, let me just write some arrow here to represent. Ayan. For summation of d sub y naton. D sub x, sorry. The summation of d sub x. Let me have here the darker color para kitaon. Ayan. So, this is equal to 3.46 meters. So, I hope na medyo nag-gets lang siya because this is a quite small Cartesian plane. Ang ginhimo ni Miss. Okay, so yan. So, there we have for our second vector or for our d sub x. Ayan. Ari siya sa d sub x. So, ito yung d sub x naton. Ari man ang aton d sub y. Now, let us solve for our resultant vector. So, we have d sub r is equal to the square root of summation of d sub x squared plus summation of d sub y squared. Okay, substitute lang the values. You have here for the d sub x, we have 3.46 meters. Square the value plus negative 10.06 meters. And then you square the value. Okay, so after that, let us see pilang value nila, pilang answer. So we have 3.46 squared. We have 11.97. So right here, 11.97 meters squared plus negative 10.06. We have negative 10.06 close parenthesis square. We have 101.20. We have 101.20 meters squared. So, cancel si square root and also the duwa ka square in the unit. Yes, sa unit. And after that, So, after that, since na-cancel ta na, pakita lang ni Miss, we have 11.97 plus 101.20. O yan. Kung nantawon nyo, ang gin-cancel pa lang ni Miss ang unit, ha? So, kinanglan, kung gin-cancel na ni Miss ang unit, ni mo nga square, kinanglan ang imo nga value, hindi mo pagkaksun sa square root. Okay? Kaya hindi subambot silingon, gin-cancel ni Miss ang square root para sa unit, hindi mo na pag-square root ang imo value. So, pakita ko lang da isa-isa. Okay, so we have there square root of 11.97 plus 101.20. There equals to, okay, so there it is. We have the d sub r, which is equal to 10.64. So, na-cancel mo na ang square root dera sa ang square sa unit. So, you have there the isa na lang ka meters for your final unit man. That's for your d sub r. Now, let us solve for your angle. So, we use tangent theta is equal to y over x. So, summation of d sub y over summation of d sub x. Substitute the values na lang. We have here, tangent theta is equal to, pilang imo nga x, kag y. For your y, we have negative 10.06 meters. For your y, or for your x gali, we have here 3.46 meters. So, ayan. Okay. Next, i-transpose lang sa other side si tangent. By the way, cancel here the unit. So, we have theta is equal to tangent negative 1. We have negative 10.06 over 3.46. Okay. So, there we have here, let us solve our reference angle. So, that's shift tan, our fraction here, negative 10.06 over 3.46. Okay, so ayan, we have negative 71.02. We have negative 71.02 degrees. And this is just for your reference angle. Now, the question is, diin mo makita nga quadrant ang imo nga angle, ang imo galing nga resultant. So, since ara siya sa may fourth quadrant, meaning, ilang tawon, tako pila na da degrees ang iyang angle. So, halin sa east, pakadto sa west, we have 180. So, as you complete the whole circle, you will have here your 360. Now, diin na siya nabutang si 71.02. Take note, kung maglanta ka reference angle, it should be relative to your x-axis. So, kung lantawon siya, ari na di siya, oh. This is your x-axis. Ari siya naga-clockwise direction. So, siya ni ang imo nga negative 71.02. Now, samtang naga-libot ka 360 degrees, may nagbalik nga 71.02. Now, the question is, pila ang imo nga final angle? So, let us have here, quadrant 4, we have 360 minus your reference angle. So, this is the reference. So, 360 minus 71.02 degrees. Again, bisan may negative na di siya, ang gamiton ta nga value in looking for the final angle would be your absolute value. Again, your absolute value. Okay, so here, theta is equal to 360 minus 71.02. Okay. So that's 288.98. 288.98 degrees. And this is now for our final angle. So to write our final answer, let us have here d sub r is equal to 10.64 meters, 288.98 degrees. So, amo na ni siyang ato nga final answer. So there it is. Let me label this one. Final answer. Okay, so there. So I hope na nag-gets lang kung paano mag-solve sa vectors using the component method. So actually hapusan na siya kung paano tato siya ginhimo ang si Pythagorean kag si x and y component. Gin-combine ta lang to sila kung paano tato sila gin-solve. In this example, gin-pang-simpon ta lang sila tanan. And then, here we have our calculations na. And gingamit ta siya, gin-combine ta sila. Why? Because we have here more than 3 vectors na gid nga ginasuma. Okay, and also in our given here, we have here a vector which is creating an angle na gid. Ayan. And also, these 3 vectors are not creating a right triangle. So that's why gingamit ta gini si component method. So I hope ninaintindihan nyo lang kung paano solve ang aton nga vectors using the component method. So thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And see you on our next synchronous session. Bye!